Yeah, hi, this is Unity Packages with GitHub. Um, and I'll just get started. I'll go over the overview of what I'm actually going to cover in this talk. First off, the idea of this talk is to talk about Unity packages, and the package manager system. So I'll go over that. The Unity registry, which is where you can get packages that are Unity packages. An open source version of that's made by just third parties. How to make your own packages, why you would do that, how you do that, and then hosting them publicly on GitHub, and also how to host them privately on GitHub, which I think is the main. That's something that I kind of had to figure out myself a little bit. So that's the kind of the where it's all leading to. First off, I'll just introduce who I am. That guy. I am the technical lead at Big Adventure, or my thing says technical director. It's kind of just like the tech guy because there's only four of us. We make roguelike deck builders. I used to be a programmer at Pickpock for about 5 years. I've got 7 years of industry experience total, and I've done a bunch of game jamming. So I was doing that even before I started working in the industry professionally, and I still do it. One of the things I worked on was Shadow Remastered Deluxe. That was my last project at Pickpock. It was very, very fun. And now I work on Dream Team Supreme, which is our first roguelike deck builder at Big Adventure. So that's me, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So the Unity Package Manager, can people like raise their hand if they use the Unity Package Manager much or at all? Okay, so like it's not unknown. It's good. So I might go over this a bit briefly, but just to cover it, it's been in Unity since 2018.2, so it's been a while. That's why you're probably familiar with it. And it supports two types of packages, asset packages and UPM packages. So UPM stands for Unity Package Manager. So that means that you can get packages from the asset store, and those will be used. So those are the things that have Unity package on the end, and those were used quite often before UPM even came out. And that might be something that you're more familiar with. But the main difference here is that these get added to your assets folder, whereas UPM packages don't. They get installed into the packages folder, and the main difference there is that packages can be updated dynamically, and they come into your project and get used, but they don't take up any space with your main project's assets. So they're kind of like more siloed in that way. They're more kind of just like, separated from all the other things you're doing. There's been a lot of times where I've been using a, asset package in my project, and then I'm looking through my assets, and there's all this like stuff I don't care about that's from, a little package that I'm using for one feature, but it's taking up so much space. The other difference is that these won't get, UPM packages don't get usually added to your repository if you're, using GitHub or any kind of version control. Packages don't get added to that. What happens is that they get stored in a like manifest, and then they'll get downloaded by whoever pulls your repo. So that's the main, the core of it really. The next part I want to go over is the Unity registry, which is probably where you get most of your packages from. Even if you've never opened up this window, you're using Unity packages in any project that you made since 2018.2 basically. A lot of Unity's like default features end up going into this. As you can see, there's the that's not very strong. Anyway, there's 2D sprite, you've got analytics, burst, there's like the Visual Studio, like integration, all that kind of stuff goes into here, and you can add and remove things as you like. So you don't need all the 3D features or 3D physics if you're not using, 3D, if you're making a 2D project. So these are all made by Unity. They're the kind of like standard bits. And it's nice because it means that you're not getting all the features at once. You get the things that you need for your project. You can add things, you can remove things. And a lot of features like the new input system are all in this. Like I said, most of them will be installed many of them will be installed by default. Like 2D Sprite, Mathematics, even the UI, the Unity UI system is, and I think UI Toolkit as well. A lot of game and editor features, which one thing to note, Recorder over there is really good for if you're recording footage for your game and you want it at full resolution. You can do that in the editor. You don't need to make a build, all that kind of stuff. So it's got a lot of useful stuff. It's really good to kind of maybe take a look, check it out, if you're looking to do something specific. Now, OpenUPM is a different kind of registry. This is an open source registry. Open source registry that's made by anybody. You can make one. It's got quite a large collection of open source packages. It's similar to the asset store in a lot of ways, but the difference is that you don't need to they're open source, so they're always free, and there's not any kind of finicking stuff you have to do with Unity's licenses or anything like that. It's just open source, and this is just an easy way for people to install things that are hosted on GitHub rather than having to go through all the finagling with Git itself and all that. It's got a command line tool to streamline installing packages as well. It's similar to npm or yarn if you've used those for I think that's for Node and for other things like Python. So it's very similar to that and actually quite useful. So you don't need to edit the manifest yourself. So that's kind of the basics of how to use them, but the main thing for this talk is to talk about how to actually make your own packages instead of using other people's, which I think are quite useful. But the first thing is, why would you even make your own packages? So you could be thinking, I can make my own tools and I can copy paste them across from other projects, and I think that's that makes sense a lot of the time, especially before you know what kind of common functionality you need between all your projects. But if you've made one or two and you're like, well, this thing was really useful and it's probably going to be really useful in the future, packaging it into a way that even other people in your studio who aren't on your team can kind of just install it, use it, as if it were just made by Unity or anybody, can be useful. So yes, the sheer functionality, I've kind of covered this already, but sheer functionality between projects and utility classes and editor tools are really, really well suited for this. If you end up making something that can switch between scenes really easily, or can load in scenes and load them out, and any kind of editor tools that are useful. I found those are really, really good for going between different projects. Sharing it with other people as well. If you make something that you think is widely useful, or you're making a personal project and it's not that useful for your company, but you're other people can use this, you can put it on UPM. So you can also do it on an asset store for free or for a cost if you want to sell it. That's also possible. And like I mentioned earlier, it keeps the main project clean because the assets folder is for game specific stuff, and things that are more generic and more general fit nicely into the packages folder. And like I mentioned, smaller repo size. You can have your game is I don't know, let's say a gig, and then all your packages are 2 gigs. That doesn't go onto your repository if you're using GitHub or any kind of public thing that can save costs as well. And anybody who grabs it will get those things just in a different kind of form. Cool. this is the basic construction of how you make a package. This is what a package looks like at its core, kind of. So it's made up of a couple of things. Documentation. Now, that's not necessary. As we all know, documentation is optional. No. You should put it in. And these are usually, I think this can be any kind of format. I usually do MD files because they're easy, they're nice and easy to do, and they're usually sufficient. But you can do like HTML, you can make PDF files, whatever you want. Like these are just, they don't have to be in a specific file format. But the thing is, if you put it in a folder with, especially with that little like wiggly tilde at the end, that means that the Unity package manager will recognize it and be able to lead users to it directly. The actual contents also come in. That consists of basically the editor and runtime folders as well as their metas. And these don't have to be an editor and editor and runtime. I've done it by that in logical chunks. You can also make some that maybe you have like a lot of analytics functionality. You can make one in the runtime folder called analytics. You can make editor subfolders that are like have all these different various features. The main reason I do editor and runtime, it's kind of convention, and it also means that your editor code stays away from your runtime code. It's like doesn't get compiled into builds and all those kind of things. The changelog. This is also not necessary, but very handy. It helps me keep track of what are in my packages. Keeps other people keep track. It's standard stuff, really. The package JSON is like the core of it, really. That's the most important part, almost. It's the manifest that details the package. If you've ever made or used packages for Node.js, so NPM packages as well, it's a very similar format. I won't go through it here, but it basically does stuff like saying what Unity version this is for, any kind of like name and details, dependencies, if your package relies on another package, like Unity's UI or ads or whatever, all that goes in here. So it's the kind of like info part of it. Oh, one thing to mention, you can also put a license in there. If you're making a private package, you probably don't need a license, but if you're doing publicly, MIT or any kind of license that you want goes in here as well. So how many people who are here are familiar with assemblies or know what assemblies are in Unity? Alright, more or less what I figured. They're kind of vague and not super clear. It's kind of what I said before, where it's a separation of logical chunks, and the common conventions are to get an editor and runtime assemblies, and respective folders for that. And assemblies are one thing that you really do need to know when making a package, because in Unity, when you write code and you don't need namespaces or anything like that. It uses something called a global assembly, which is just where all your Unity code in the assets folder gets kind of compiled and put together. When you're making a package, that doesn't happen. You have to have assemblies which can relate to all your code. So we use something called an assembly definition to define that, and at its core, like the basic thing is that it defines how the section of contents can be accessed and used. So if you look at the one I have here, there's a couple of things that we put in here. There's allow unsafe code, which you should always have off, basically, if you want to be safe. But there's things like what references you require. If your package or this part of the package, so you're using, let's say you're making part of your package that handles with your custom analytics backend, but you want to use some of the Unity analytics features, you would have that be part of your assembly definition, part of your dependencies for this assembly definition of this part of the package. There's things like which platforms it's for. If you're doing a whole bunch of stuff in one of your packages that's all for iOS, you can say this only applies for the iOS platform. If you're not building for that, if you're not targeting Apple devices, then none of this gets used, none of this gets compiled or messing up with anything else. The reason that runtime and editor are usually separate is because you can do runtime is for like all platforms, and then you can say editor is only for editor code. And it's similar to putting stuff in an editor folder in your assets folder, where it doesn't get compiled, it doesn't get used unless you're running stuff in the editor. So that's the general idea, but you can make these more separated as you like. And it's kind of like at the end of the day, the way to think about it is like it's a mini project. Where your code just doesn't mess around with other pieces, and if you've ever done other C# coding outside of Unity, it's kind of like a DLL in that sense. So that's the core of it. Like, this has a lot of documentation online. The Unity docs actually cover this, fairly well. So I'm just kind of like giving you an overview, but definitely worth doing your own research into. The package manifest. I lied. I am actually going to cover this really briefly. So this is the package JSON file, which is and like I said, it's very similar to npm's package one. And it's not really that complicated. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of things. There's the name of the package, which has the kind of like reverse domain pattern of com.your_thing and example. That's what I've got there. There's the version, and this uses regular semver versioning. There's the description, the display name, which is what the users will actually see. Unity means the minimum Unity version. I'm quite sure it means the minimum. It might be the maximum. There's documentation on this again, fairly good documentation. There's private, whether this is actually, I think this is more of a kind of, just so users know, but whether it's private or not. There's the author, and dependencies again, and then the license. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I just thought I'd cover this really briefly. I think there are more fields, but these are really the ones that like matter the most. Especially if you're making your first package and you're not doing too much. So, to the hosting part. This is how you go about the process of generally hosting on GitHub. This is pretty general again. This is kind of not really talking about the GitHub part because there's plenty on that. How many people have like used GitHub on a fairly regular basis or have used it before? Yeah, so it's like any other Git platform really. So and again, if there's a bunch of tutorials on it if you need them. So this is what you would do if you're happy to have it be public. So this is if you're making stuff that isn't, proprietary or otherwise you're happy to share, especially if it's like hobby things and you want to maybe get more feedback on it and get other people contributing. There are a lot of these, like I mentioned, if you want to share it. The way you do that is you put it on a publicly accessible repository on GitHub. You get to pick whether it's private or public, so you put it on a public one. And then people can just use it using add package from Git URL. You can do this as well if a package that you're looking for is on GitHub but not on OpenUPM. You can just kind of grab the URL, chuck it in. Unity's pretty happy with it. And the main thing is just to make sure Git is installed and in your path. So if Unity complains, it probably won't be in your path. I imagine most people here know what a path is, but if you don't, you can look it up. Most of this you can look up, and I also have the slides up that we recorded, but I'll put them up on my Twitter and Blue Sky after this, so you can check them out, go over them again, and search all the things that might not be super clear. And like I mentioned, you can put it on OpenUPM if you like. That's a really good way to get more, feedback on it, get more people using it. Yeah, but now to like the main crux of why I made this talk, which is privately hosting. Now, this will be used mostly if you only want to be accessible by you or your company, and self-hosting isn't an option. A lot of companies, or or at least companies that I've worked at before, do have their own Git Git repositories that are self-hosted physically at the office or whatever. At Big Adventure currently we don't have this, so we had to go use something else, and GitHub seemed like a reasonable choice. The main difference is you put it on a private repository as usual. Now there's some complexity here because Unity requires permission to access it, but you can't when you grab a Git URL repository. Unity doesn't actually have any way to put in credentials. Like if you're using Git to access private things, usually you need to put in your login details, or you need to somehow connect using some details, and a lot of good clients allow that, but Unity doesn't. So initially it'll complain, oh, I can't access this repository. SSH is the answer. How many people here are familiar with SSH? Cool. Okay, so you know it. I didn't when I started this. When I initially had to do this, I was like, I don't know what SSH is. I've never used it before. I know the general idea, but I've never set it up before. So this works because Unity will just have the key already accessible, like everything else. So let me just check how we're going for time. I feel like I'm talking a little fast. Okay, I'll try and slow down. So I'm briefly gonna go over SSH, and then I'm gonna explain the steps that I used to get it set up for Unity. Now, I should warn you, this entire section is I just put in the steps, but it's not necessarily something you'll be able to memorize just from watching it. Again, the slides will be up, and also I learned all this from online resources. I've just kind of compiled it in one place here. You can research this, look into it in your own time. I'm mostly just giving an overview. So if you've never used SSH before, if you're on a Windows machine, Windows OpenSSH is the simplest method. It might already be installed, even on your computer. I think it is by default. Generate a key. The main step here is when you're generating a key to not give it a passkey, because even though that's secure and it's recommended, Unity will again not have an option to have you supply the passkey. It just needs one. It just needs to be able to access it automatically. So if you're just making one for this repository for Unity to use, do it without a passkey, which is really, really simple. If you're, again, I'm kind of summarizing it here. If you want to know what any of this means, you'll be able to find it online. You can find maybe slightly different instructions if you're doing it on a different operating system as well, but I'm just covering it really quickly here. So you generate key using SSH keygen put your email here. I think it can be any email, but good practice, I guess, do the email that you use for your GitHub account. And then you add it to SSH agent by specifically running PowerShell as administrator. This is all Windows instructions. There's analogs for Linux and Mac, I'm sure. Using this weird capitalized syntax. Go through these steps. Again, this is mostly here so that when you look at the slides later that I'll put online, you can find them. But basically you add it as you would anything else, and you also make sure that the agent is running all the time, especially if this is your first time using SSH. These are the kind of standard steps. The public key for your GitHub account is the bit that actually connects your private key that you have hosted on your machine to the account that will have access to the private repository. So this is the bit that makes it accessible. Basically what you do is you go to your GitHub account, and there's an area called there's an area, I thought I put it up here, but there's an area that says GPG and SSH keys. You go in there, you add your public key to that, the entire public key, and you put the name. So if you're, here's another kind of like thing to mention. If you're using multiple machines, if you have a work from home machine and a office machine, for example, you have to do this for each different machine because SSH is a kind of per device basis. So here, I put them for my home laptop. I would go through all these steps again if I was doing it for a work computer, or anything else. So that's the public key. The private key, you are never meant to share. Absolutely, under no circumstances do you share this. You keep it on your computer. You don't even look at yourself, really. Like, it just sits there in the place that you created it. And like I mentioned, you have to make a different one for every computer that needs access. I hope you noted down questions that you have, because that's all. Very, very quick and brief. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. There's also a QR code there that I'm going to leave up for a while that goes to our demo that is not actually out yet, but it will come out in a week or two. But you can join the Discord, join the newsletter, and everything from that. So it's a bit extra. Cool. Thank you.
Hi, any questions at all? And run around, hand the mic.
Hey, thanks for the talk. That was great. Curious about the open UPM. I think by default everything is public. I know you can host privately on UPM. Have you ever tried that?
So I haven't tried it myself. I think I remember looking into it at some point, and there were some instructions on how to do it, so you can host privately on OpenUPM. I think I didn't see a lot of reason for it, because if it's just privately for yourself, that's kind of going through extra steps. I think the other thing is that it required some very specific setup with not GitHub. It needed a different kind of host. I looked through it at some point and I was like, I didn't see the usefulness of this. But there's documentation on how to do it. But it seemed less free than I remember.
Yeah, bit of complexity.
Sorry?
There's a bit of complexity, I think.
Yeah, there's a bit of extra steps for, as far as I could tell, not much of a benefit. Cool. I mean, if I have no questions, that probably means I explained everything pretty well. Cool. Yeah. Remember to scan the QR code, and yeah, you can talk to me afterwards if you have any other thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you very much.